Whether it be the national borders of Europe, the end of isolationism in the United States, or the idea of international organizations such as the United Nations today, the Treaty of Versailles either directly or indirectly led to their creation. Those are the results of World War I. By 1920, people would have called it the Great War. This is because they were in the wake of the largest armed conflict up to that point, and many thought something like that could never happen again. It was thought that the Treaty of Peace with Germany, the linchpin in the Central Powers and world superpower, was put in the dirt with reparations that took away German pride. Some economists and historians argue that, in summary, the treaty did not create the effect the drafters had intended, and instead led to the rise of yet another conflict that would come to raise Europe for a second time. So, in order to better understand how the Treaty of Versailles and its consequences came about, we first need to look at why World War I started. Its reasons are complex. Before the war, tensions were brewing in Europe. It had been almost 100 years since the last major conflict, the Napoleonic Wars, and the German states had conglomerated after the Holy Roman Empire had disbanded. The stage was set, and sides would begin to develop. Great Britain, France, and Russia would be the main members of the Allied powers, also called the Triple Entente. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire, along with others, formed the Central Powers, also known as the Triple Alliance. How did these factions come about? To simplify, everyone was suspicious of each other or held a grudge intending to stop others from gaining influence. A Bosnian Serb nationalist would assassinate the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and his wife. In retaliation for this, they declared war on neighboring Serbia to hopefully squash any moves for independence in the unstable kingdom. Russia, who had been a long-time defender of Serbia and all Slavic peoples, subsequently declared war on Austria-Hungary. This started what historians call a domino effect that brought up the ambitions of the countries into action. Here's a recap of what happened. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia with German aid. Russia then declares war on Austria-Hungary, which brings France into the conflict because of a previous agreement. This provokes Germany, who feels surrounded, and declares war on Russia and France. The Ottomans had been feuding with Russia for centuries and had common interests with Austria-Hungary, so they too declared war. A cautious Britain was brought into the war once Germany's plans to invade Belgium had leaked, a country it had sworn to protect. They also feared Germany's growing navy. Italy would initially join as part of the Central Powers due to competition with France over colonial possessions in North Africa, but would be convinced to switch sides once territorial promises were made. The United States would only join later to support the Allies once Germany started to infringe upon trade, and the Zimmermann telegram was leaked. Once the dust had settled, it is estimated that about 20 million lives were lost. Famine struck across Europe. The Entente had emerged victorious and were looking to make Germany, the center of attention during the war, suffer the consequences of its actions. Through the Treaty of Peace with Germany, also known by its more common name, the Treaty of Versailles, named after the Parisian palace it was signed in by the Bourgeois Clemenceau, Prime Minister of France, Woodrow Wilson, President of the United States, and David Lloyd George, Prime Minister of Britain.
But when it was all over, the statesmen went to discuss the peace treaty at Versailles, armed only with 19th century prejudices. The idealism of President Woodrow Wilson would soon be shattered by the harsh practicalities of his European partners. They were determined that never again would the Germans have the opportunity of ravaging France. The treaty dismembered Germany and its allies, the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire. These large and powerful states were to be broken up so that the various ethnic groups they contained would have their own separate countries. Unfortunately, however, this checkerboard of small independent nations would prove to be too weak to defend itself against an embittered and vengeance-seeking Germany. Instead of healing old wounds, the Treaty of Versailles only succeeded in creating a new discontent. More drastic solutions would soon replace the fumbling of the diplomats.
Germany was to lose about 10% of its territory in the strategic and coal-filled Saarland and the important Polish port of Danzig. Germany was also ordered to pay $32 billion, an amount it would never fully pay off. To ensure Germany would not be able to respond to these reparations, the German military was severely limited and forced to accept full responsibility for the war. It is from this document the League of Nations, the predecessor to the modern United Nations, was born. The world had now entered a new era, one with consequences of the time before it. As mentioned in the video, Woodrow Wilson had made a grand plan for the future of the world in his 14-point speech. While most of his ideas would fall flat during negotiations, the last point made it through as the Covenant of the League of Nations. A new international organization was born in an attempt to handle future conflicts diplomatically. It would come to fail at its job, with the US never joining, but the United Nations took its place and now defines how countries interact with each other. World War I marked an important change in foreign policy. In the past, America practiced isolationism, meaning they aimed to remain neutral and not partake in major conflicts. That would change, however, marking a new era where the US became involved in seemingly everything. This includes up to modern conflicts, much of which had occurred in the Middle East. We can still see the impacts of the treaty today by other means. The national borders of Europe, while being more so defined by World War II and the fall of the Soviet Union, those events, many would argue, are the result of World War I. Therefore, World War I, and one of its most defining treaties, led to all of these different outcomes. As the turning point in history, it toppled the crowns of Europe, taking the US out of its shell to become a world superpower, along with the rise of communism in Russia from World War I, changing the world and setting the stage for the future.